Welcome to NeuroNoodle's Neurofeedback and Neuropsychology Podcast, featuring tech legend Jake Gunkelman. He's the man who has read well over 500,000 brain scans, and Dr. Marie Swingle, author of iMinds. Our goal is to provide information and promote options for better mental health. The NeuroNoodle Podcast is supported by listeners and businesses just like you. Jake Gunkelman.
Get this rolling here.
Last minute guest.
Well, Rachman's a good guest, though. And,
Yeah. What? I wonder where I got him from.
Geez, I don't know.
Pete Jansons, Rachman Chung, guest. Go.
Hi, I'm Dr. Rachman Chung. As a board-certified chiropractic neurologist, I have extensive training and experience in the diagnosis and management of sport and spine injuries and complex neurological conditions. I treat a broad range of patients, from children and adults to athletes and seniors, suffering from acute and chronic injuries, balance and dizziness disorders, traumatic brain injuries, migraines, Parkinson's disease, and stroke rehabilitation. My approach begins with a comprehensive neurological and musculoskeletal examination and diagnostic testing to objectively evaluate the function of your brain and physical performance. This allows me to identify your individual strengths and weaknesses and to customize a therapeutic approach that can selectively target, strengthen, and improve your function with measurable results. And most importantly, to keep living a full and active life. So if you or a loved one suffer from chronic pain or a complex health condition, hope is just a phone call away.
Oh. No, he's got a heck of a business going over there.
Yeah, he's a bright young guy, and he's been focused on EEG, QEG, and ERPs as a functional neurologist, chiropractic neurologist, and he's got a good business partner, Jessica Tolentino. So they've got an active practice.
And I'll bring it up later in the show, but how did you guys connect?
Through the summit. He attended, and he was on group EEG reviews and contracted for quite a few individual sessions going over data. And I look over his shoulder now as he goes through EEGs. So I'm not doing it. He's driving, as it were, and I just watch and
Right.
comment. I kibitz on the side. You fool! Look what you missed. No, he's quite good.
Well, last night on the Q&A, it was me and Anthony for a period of time, Joshua Moore. Well, sleep came up. That's a very popular topic.
Nobody on the panel fell asleep, did they?
Just me, one eye.
Well, sleep's a huge topic, and having had a 3-bed sleep lab for a number of years, it's one that I have a pretty deep knowledge in. If that topic comes up at some point, we can chat about it in fairly good detail.
Well, as usual, I had to come up with a great question, waiting for everybody else to show up, but I brought up Direwolves.
So there's 2 males and 1 female, and they're supposed to not be able to get out. This
Wuhan.
2,000 acre. No, this is in North America.
I know. I'm being not funny.
So, 2,000 acres, the wolves are supposedly not able to get out of this. Now, I'm thinking 2,000 acres, who the freak built that fence? Were they really good at it to the point where a wolf couldn't figure out how to get out of a fence, you know. Anyway, I uh,
So you have an opinion on that then?
uh, you know it, it's first of all, they're not fully dire wolves. They've brought back characteristics of by capturing genetic pieces uh, from historic finds, bones and
Right, right.
and whatnot. So, if you can find fragments of DNA, you can then CRISPR splice them in where there was pieces already in a gray wolf. And so they don't really have direwolf genetics. They have gray wolf genetics with pieces added in. And that makes them bigger. And already these little pups are bigger than they would normally be by a long shot. And also it gives them the white, thicker coat. So some of the physical characteristics, we don't know how, what mix of personality of gray wolf, dire wolf are going to be there, but um, it's a pretty limited genetic pool for them to spin up a population from as well. So,
Jay, who is this?
well, Rachman, it's good to see you.
Hello, guys.
Rachman Chung. Thank you for Dr. Rachman Chung. Thank you for it's Rachman, right? Rachman Chung?
Yeah,
Right?
Rahman.
Okay. Okay. Long time no see since the summit.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a while. I missed you this last year.
Yeah. I'm gonna make up for it this year. Don't worry.
People will be there twice as big.
That's right.
Cameras and show.
I got to make up for things, Doc. Jay, how did you connect? You said through Suisun City. Is that how we connected?
Yeah, and EEG reviews as well. I don't know. I think they call it grand rounds. I think we initially called it back to basics. It was just a group, but on Fridays, and but that's varied in size from 30, 40 down to maybe 16, 20, up and down, depending upon who wants to split the small bit of fees there are. So, I knew him from that group, and then some individual work with review of patient data and case consultation. And more recently, he drives. I kibitz over the shoulder, like backseat driver, sort of a thing. But no, he's he's the doctor. I'm the tech. So we've gotten things into an appropriate circumstance here. So,
Dr. Chung, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
Oh, yes. Now, what is going on in the business over there? What you got cooking? You got a big whiteboard there. What problems are you solving?
Out of to-do lists and problem solving. Here, this one says stimulate, engage, and train. That's for the model of, really the overall approach to care about stimulating with neuromodulation techniques and then engaging the systems we want to train with biofeedback and neurofeedback, and then training with personalized neurorehabilitation. Yeah. And then
I have that on my fridge too, and my wife doesn't listen.
It's the ideal circumstance where you use neurostimulation, neuromodulation to enhance the neuroplasticity, and then you train the system when it's in a neuroplastic state. and that optimizes your. It provides a good operant. The system that you're training has more variability built into it at that point, and it's easier to train a signal that's variable than one that's stable. So, it optimizes outcomes.
With all of our evaluations, functional neurologists, we call ourselves functional neurologists because it's a systems thinking approach, just really what the way the brain is designed, is that we're evaluating the function of the brain versus just looking at structure. And so we're combining the neurotherapy with functional neurology, customized approach to look at each of the different systems throughout the brain and nervous system, being able to identify where those exact weaknesses are, which ones are contributing to specific symptoms. So then we can selectively target and strengthen those systems with the right types of therapy and exercises. And it's really fun to do, keeps the work very interesting. And with Jay's guidance, I've been be able to really enhance my outcomes as a functional neurologist with using EEG and QEG, as most of the listeners know here. I really love it because I take a particular neurological lens when I think about brainwaves and how that can personalize care and direct how do we be specific with targeting this region. Especially I love the findings of thalamocortical dysrhythmia when you see the slowing of the alpha and in the temporal or frontal regions or occipital regions. It's very common to see those. And when you see the asymmetry there, it really helps you identify the target. And I compare those with all the sensory motor aspects. So with eye movements related to the particular visual field and the hemisphere that's integrating that. The patient has like visual motion sensitivity. That's very common with like vestibular migraines and concussion. And long COVID, we can correlate that with those dysregulated sites and then start to target them with much more confidence. And so I really love that approach to just have much more accuracy and faster outcomes because of that. And thanks to Jay, I could see those things and not miss them anymore. And yeah, it's really fun to do.
I'm going to rename this podcast thanks to Jay. I saw a lot of stuff that you're doing with concussions, and it's making me thinking about athletes. Do you have a lot of athletes that are coming or peak performance people coming in? It says, hey, fix me, doc.
Yeah, absolutely. We see a broad range of patients from children to adults and seniors. A lot of athletes, as you know, they're just highly motivated. They like to be very specific and fast outcomes. A lot about performance is about regulating stress and anxiety related to performance, and then the injuries themselves. So my background actually wasn't from skateboarding. I used to be sponsored by Pal Peralta in the 90s, and it's the injuries that led to healthcare and alternative medicine, and just the perpetual journey to kind of learn how to heal myself and help others. So I understand the performance mindset and the actual trauma that it induces too. You don't really pay attention too much when you're actually in the sport because you're obsessed and focused with performance, but it requires so much focus and a lot of pain that you have to really cancel out and able to focus on your sport. And that can be traumatic at times as well, especially when you've been doing it for so long.
What do you think Tony Hawk's EEG looks like?
I don't know. I'd love to see. Let's invite him. Come over to my office, Tony Hawk, and we'll check out your brain.
Well, you have that clinic in Boston, right, where the NFL players are donating their brains, and there's got to be a contra coup going on with skateboarders. Or am I off? I'm getting ahead of my skis, pardon the pun.
Well, you get every kind of injury in skateboarding, all the physical injuries and a lot of concussions, probably depending on, how much impact you take, a lot of subconcussive hits. I assume Tony Hawk might have a lot of those with the falls off the vert ramp over and over again. That'd be an interesting study to look at, just like they did with NFL football players with subconcussive hits. What about other sports? Not as much money with researching skateboarders, but
Tony Hawk's got some cash.
Yeah, he's in the generation where the skateboarders have the longest career span so far in skateboarding. And a lot of that is due to incorporating, a lot of probably training and rehabilitation that wasn't part of it, and coaching and mentoring, which he had with the team of Stacy Peralta.
Yeah. What what would you do with a parent's got a kid that wants to be a skateboarder? I'm guessing we're on the West Coast. Everybody wants to do a half pipe on the West Coast. What would be the when would you want to get a baseline EEG for your skateboarder just to make sure all the pieces are in place?
Yeah, same reason why we all should probably have one, is that because life happens, injuries happen. Establishing a baseline with the brainwave analysis and QEEG is really important because it's very sensitive to identify concussions. But a more comprehensive approach would be doing what we do in our office with the functional neurology evaluation, looking at your eye tracking, your vestibular function, the inner ear, your balance and coordination, and then doing a serial testing with baseline testing that does basically cognitive testing and balance testing. So I use CNS vital signs for a more in-depth cognitive test. But a lot of people come in with concussions and all their sensory motor functions look really good. Their eye movements, their balance, but they're still having a lot of symptoms. And it's the brain waves that identify, like there is actually something significant going on.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
Examining the organ that has been impacted.
So, like what age? I mean, a kid wants to skateboard when they're what? Do you have a client there? Not to name any names, but is there a process that you see that they say, hey, they come in, I want to get a baseline, and here's what it is, and when they get their physical every year, do you do a mental every year? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, I'd say there's really two tracks of doing like baseline testing. You can do a very simple approach like they have with the apps for baseline concussion testing. We can add a QEEG to that. So that could be very short and sweet. And then we have the more comprehensive approach of really using more objective measurements of like eye tracking and balance and motor functions. So that would be the more comprehensive approach. The sooner you do it in life and do it once a year at least, and definitely if you get injured, to check to see what's going on. So skateboarders can start as early as 2 or 3 years old. I think a little bit older is more common, after 5 years of age, where they have better balance standing upright. But if they grow up with a skater dad, then they might be up there very soon. On Instagram, I'm just blown away by some of these little skaters that they look like 3 or 5 years of age, and they're killing it. Yeah, it's amazing. It's great to have a resilient body too, to be able to fall. You need that for skateboarding.
What about those two-wheeled scooters? That's got to be keeping you busy.
I don't actually see a whole lot of injuries from the scooters, except for maybe the electric ones, if you're referring to that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
flying
you're
off
going
those.
40 miles an hour on those things, and
Yeah,
of course you got to wear a helmet.
yeah, and the steering wheel can just pivot on you and it crack. That's the dangerous part.
Jay, can you imagine if you had that back in your day?
I rode a motorcycle with a sidecar.
That's
Come on.
that'd be a heck of a battery pack. So,
Yeah.
so we met in Tucson in 2023, right, Doc?
Yeah.
We had a couple beverages, talking about life, and what has changed from that time that we met to today? And I'll give you a little nudge on the AI side of things, because that's really ramped up since we last saw each other. How has that helped your practice and your clients? Are you using it?
I like to use it for just faster research, like Perplexity AI, since it's more reference based. If I have like clinical questions or writing documents, I use it the most really just to edit drafts of things.
Yeah.
Started documents, revise an email, and some of the marketing content. But I don't use it entirely because then it will just kind of sound flat. But once I have fed it enough information about my practice, I actually was pretty impressed with how it can help me write summaries with the clinical approach that we do. So that's what I've been using it most. I'm interested in experimenting with it as far as like doing photo shoots and swapping out the environments, and just to make it more affordable, because I could do an entire photo shoot and not like a whole lot of things. But there's so much to learn and so many platforms, it's hard to decide about what to learn. How about you guys? How is it changing your
Don't ask Jay.
Actually, at Sassoon Summit this year, Lisa Tatran's going to be presenting the integration of AI and EEG lab. There's also, I think, some interesting use of it to sort through findings that are in the literature and whether you can see those findings in the data sets that you've got and the differential predictions that are available with that. So, but she's going to be showing that as a particular presentation. But it's actually got some fairly advanced stuff. However, it's got a long ways to go. Shortly after I did a talk on the insula and being able to see it as a far field phase reversal in the EEG, Lisa sent me the quick summary. I was maybe 20 minutes after I finished talking, boom, in the email. So, and she asked me what this is just a crude spit out of what AI said about far field phase reversals. And I basically said I would give it a C minus because they talked about the importance of the montage, but then they didn't say which one they picked to do their data analysis. And then they also suggested that far field phase reversals could be field effects, which they could be, which is an artifactual source, or they could be an actual brain source. I actually thought they were about to actually say something meaningful and good, but they then hypothesized that it would be the thalamus or the basal ganglia, neither one of which produce visible surface EEG. So they didn't mention the perihippocampu or the insula, which are known cortical sources that are deep. So they reviewed kind of common stuff, which would give them kind of a C, but they blew the montage and they kind of goofed up on some stuff. So a C minus, which is not bad for a 20-minute summary spit out, and somebody with a bit of knowledge could go through and probably make some fixes to that, and perhaps even educate the model that spit it out, which ultimately is the trick is the data that you're putting into the chat GPT 4.5 or whatever it is at this point. So
not for you. You don't pay for it, Jay.
Hey, I'm not into AI. I'm stuck with the old skin version myself, So, and pattern recognition is an important thing. It's what the phenotype model came from is pattern recognition and 500,000 EEGs, and me thinking back in time, what did I see in 500,000 EEGs? And there are these 11 groups that I saw all the time. So, and that, proposing the genetics. So that whole model came out of the old-fashioned pattern recognition that the normal human brain does fairly well.
The Red Bull athletes, doctor, the skaters, the BMXers, how are their brains different than like a football player, basketball player? The reason where I'm going with it, it seems like they're looking for a rush, jumping out of an airplane with a parachute. Are there unique brain activities to those types of athletes versus the traditional athletes that you see out there?
I think all athletes are kind of adrenaline thrill-seeking people in different ways. I wouldn't attribute that to Red Bull. I think they're probably just brilliant marketing and content creators with their videos. I think it's a terrible drink for an athlete. I saw this X Games competition long ago with the super vert ramp, and guy did it a huge air and fell from probably over 20 feet high to the flat bottom. His shoes ejected off, and he actually walked away, and they put like a drink Red Bull in his hand. And I was like, oh man, that's that's like not so great.
And
But
about all
I love
time.
their videos. They have awesome sport videos.
Hey everyone, if you're enjoying the show and want to help us keep it going, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Your support helps improve the content and brings on great guests and grow the show. Join us on Patreon at patreon.com/NeuroNoodle. But hey, if supporting financially isn't in the cards right now, no worries. You can still help us out for free by liking, subscribing, and sharing this episode. It really makes a difference and helps more people find the show. If we've earned it, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. But like the wiring, I mean, it's like what if I need that adrenaline rush, jumping off of a airplane versus doing a first down in football. I mean, they're two.
I'm not sure. I mean, what do you think, Jay?
There are people that do their sport specifically for the adrenaline, and I had an ex, and she's passed, unfortunately. And she was an emergency room physician. And unless there was adrenaline and sirens and lights, she wasn't on. She needed that zap. And she raced motorcycles on tracks, a sport bike, big bikes, 700cc track bikes, and she absolutely loved adrenaline and sought it out anywhere she could. But emergency medicine is a way to get a lot of adrenaline. So she was a very, very, very good emergency doc. If you were in an emergency situation, you would want her to be the doc. So yeah, she was very, very good.
Well, that means she had the moo waves going on. Am I getting ahead of my skis here, Jay? I mean, the focus in on, because you have to block, like with an athlete, you step on the field, you block everything out. When you hit that half pipe, doctor, I mean, you have to block everything out. Do you need those moo waves focused in, or how should I say that, Jay or
I,
Dr. Rockman?
it's not that they're necessarily happening during the performance. Mu may happen in athletes in order for them to detach and get into their zone. But when you're actually in the middle of a performance, the level of focus is usually laser-like, and your salience network has kicked in your central executive network, and you're on. And central executive network turns off mu like the light switch. It's just gone. So I would expect to see anterior cingulate engagement to the point where there was a single pointed focus. So,
Yeah, I guess I
and
could.
when you have a single pointed focus, you don't have much peripheral stuff. You're locked on.
Yeah, I think with skateboarding, there's like really kind of two types of kind of focused and kind of broader focused activities, like just technical tricks. I spent a lot of time just working on one block or curb for just hours and days by myself. And you're doing a lot of technical flip tricks and manuals and sliding tricks. And it takes, weeks and months sometimes to learn a trick. And you're just trying it hundreds of times a day. And that's kind of really fun and playful and very serious because it requires a lot of technical focus. But you're doing like basically physics with your body. And when I later got into physics and science, and I was like, this is the same part of my brain, except it was a physical expression of that same stuff. You're problem solving the speed, the resistance, the trajectory, the spatial dynamics, and just constantly going through. And I think that's very common with every sport, some, variety different, of course, depending on what you're doing. And then you have the more dangerous stuff, like launching off, 15 sets of stairs or over, a 20-foot drop. And that's a whole other kind of adventure. And that requires usually for me, like a couple falls to get the adrenaline going. So I just know like I just need to eat it really hard and take the pain. But then all of a sudden I'll become alive and awake enough to be able to have enough energy to do it.
This reminds me a lot of the gymnast Simone Biles and the issue that she had. She couldn't take, what was it, Adderall to Japan or whatever, and she couldn't focus. Does it Adderall play a role with your adrenaline sports people or whatever you want to label it, the BMXers? And then you have to work with neurofeedback and they're on the drugs. How does that come into play, Doc?
If you have diagnosed ADD, and when you look at the brain activity, the alpha frequency is too slow, Adderall or Vyvanse are amphetamines, and they speed up the background alpha frequency to normalize brain function. And that's it. If that's what you're on it for, then it does a very good job. There's a difference between norepinephrine, which is what's being produced to speed things up, and adrenaline. They're related but not the same. And your adrenaline is going to be produced through the HPA axis kicking it in. So, assuming you have a pituitary, so you've got to have a P for the HPA axis to be going on. And the good thing is when that HPA axis is going on, it also triggers other things, cortisol. So your steroid level goes up, so you're not going to inflame with injury as badly. And so there's all sorts of things that end up having to change.
Exercise, of
Adderall,
course,
Doc.
is a form of self-stimulation as well, right? So that's why a lot of people with ADD and ADHD find exercise, of course, the most therapeutic because you're engaging the environment the way you're using all your systems, muscles, joints, visual activity, adrenaline, a focused task that you can maybe obsess and get good at. That's a natural form of stimulation. May not fix your ADHD, but it's
Yeah.
very common to be a driving force. Very, easier to recognize when people are just restless, right? If they're just sitting around, they need
Yeah.
something to do, some form of engagement.
So you can reset your alpha frequency with norepinephrine from amphetamines, or you can stimulate from the top down with outside world experience. The cortex downward to the thalamus. It's a thalamo-cortical thalamic rhythm. Primarily, the frequencies are determined in the thalamus, brainstem, and thalamus. However, the cortex stimulation also can speed it up some. So, you can self-stimulate to the point where you're actually normalizing function, but it's not always permissible. What school classroom lets somebody walk back and forth in the back of the room? That would be sufficient stimulation to keep somebody engaged, but that's too disturbing for other people. So, they would prefer the Adderall, Vyvanse, methylphenidate, modafinil. I mean, there's a whole bunch of meds that are stimulant or stimulant-like that are prescribed for ADD at this point. Actually, for teachers, the Lancet did a big study on ADD, ADHD, and medications, and which ones were tolerated better and whatnot. And for teacher ratings on improvement, the only two that had any impact on teacher ratings were basically modafinil, which basically just keeps you awake, and also methylphenidate, which is a dopamine reuptake inhibitor, not an amphetamine. So the amphetamines and a lot of other drugs were the teachers did not notice any difference at all. So. But then teacher ratings are only one of many forms of measurement. Tolerability of the medication is also something to look at. And they looked at placebo versus the medication that was being prescribed and which ones were more tolerated. And the amphetamines were never as well tolerated as the placebos. So
This thinking process between a bottom-up system and a top-down system, and how the physical body, and particularly muscular input into the cerebellum, firing into the dentorubral-thalamocortical pathway. So the cerebellum is essentially one of the driving forces for setting thalamocortical rhythmicity. And so when you're looking at just an EEG method of looking at a slowing of the alpha through those circuits, whether, depending on which lobe you're thinking about that circuitry, what's firing into that? Is it an auditory pathway? Is it a cerebellar pathway? Is it a combination of both? And how do we use therapy to actually activate those systems? So that's why we'll do specific exercises to activate the cerebellum on one side. And then we'll explore that through looking at balance and gait and coordinative activities. So you can tell, is there a bottom ascending weakness in the sensory motor systems that are contributing to that pathway? And then if you're looking at the dopamine centers, a little higher in the midbrain, you're looking at maybe the reaction times and speed of your saccadic fast jumping eye movements, and looking at, say, if my left hemisphere is going to have a delayed reaction with my saccade to the right side, and I have weakness of these coordination tasks and I'm falling to the right, I'm looking at that entire circuitry and knowing with my exam and EEG, I need to do both kinds of therapies. I need to do a sensory motor therapy, and then using neurofeedback to train the cortical thalamic circuit, and then connect them together efficiently so the whole network is engaged. I think a really good example is Parkinson's, because we know that there's a lack of dopamine, but we want to stimulate that afferently through lights and cerebellar activity to activate more of a reflexogenic aspect to get a burst of dopamine. And then we want to, so that kind of gives some activity, and then we want to train from the top down. And we can do that with specific kinds of eye movements. Some are reflexive, if I'm jumping my finger, or some are voluntary with like to memory or perception and visual spatial training. So those are the kind of thinking concepts that I go through when trying to strategize. Well, how do I activate it from the bottom up and top down, and use these strategies to do it?
Has the technology kept up or advanced to be able to pick up that signal way back at the cerebellum, or is it still?
I hear it's not, but that's why I like the neurological exam. It's one of the easiest things to test the cerebellum. There's so many tests, and it's very accurate and sensitive.
Jay, what do you think? Because a lot of people are selling that.
Well, a lot of people sell lots of things, but it is buyer beware out there, isn't it? Historically, the cerebellum was viewed as one that you had to actually have an electrode in it to end up measuring it electrically, because it doesn't have oriented pyramidal cell layers that are shooting out for us to pick up with an electrode on the surface. The discharges there tend to cancel. So, seeing something outside of it is been historically viewed as a bit of a fool's errand. And at the same time, over the years, you've seen, Corey Hammond suggest, sub-inion placement for picking up cerebellum, and you see people suggesting that they can see it with surface EEG. And MEG can see it. EEG, not so much. So I don't think we're there yet. The mathematical assumptions of the SW Loretta is that all of the tissue is transparent, and you can just dial in the location and pick up the activity in that location. Quite the assumption. When you have an incredible claim, you have to have incredible evidence to support it. It's historically viewed as not being possible. So if you say it is possible, where's your extraordinary evidence? So far, that extraordinary evidence has not been provided. Um, we had an interesting encounter. Cynthia Curson set up a panel discussion. Dirk DeRitter, myself, Bob Thatcher, and Joel Lubar. Obviously, unfortunately, Joel's passed. And Cynthia likes to kind of toss her grenade into the room to get things going. So, first question is, Jay, what do you think of S.W. Loretto? So I said, well, before I say anything about the software, let me say what I think generates EEG. The postsynaptic potential summation, typical background surface EEG, event-related potentials, and slow cortical potentials. Those summate to make the surface EEG. And historically, the cerebellum was not something that was viewed as being possible to see. So I haven't seen the evidence. If there is a way to see it, I would be very, very happy, but I have yet to see anything that shows the evidence. They asked Dirk, and he says, I agree with Jay. He talked a little bit and about it, and how you're talking about subcortical structures whose not generating a systematic voltage seen externally, and you've got gigantic signals right in front of you. It's like listening to the conversation in a car on the other side of a football stadium when the whole stadium is screaming. Well, that's quite the claim. You're picking up something so subtle at such a distance with so much noise in between. And if the claim is true, it's fantastic. Bob then said, well, I've got 400 papers from the Library of Congress. And Dirk said, whoa. I just wrote a paper and I pulled 600 papers, but I only found like 4 or 5 that were actually proof that I needed to have as a reference. So which ones of these 400 are you claiming prove your point? And then he showed a couple of studies, and Dirk said, well, there's a lot of ways to come up with that answer. I don't view this as dismissively supportive evidence. And he offered that he implants into the subthalamic nucleus implants for Parkinson's patients that have the ability to measure the activity, not just stimulate, but actually measure. So he can measure the subthalamic nucleus activity. If you say you can measure it from the surface, why don't you measure it and see if you see what I see? And Bob denied the offer. I would have, if I believed what I had really worked, I would jump at the chance to have Dirk prove it. But, it's not my software, so I couldn't jump at the chance. And it may be that there's some reflection of some activity there in some fashion, but proof is in the pudding, and it's not how it looks on the shelf or what the salesman says about it. It's how it eats. So the people who are using it have to end up seeing the validation of it in their clinical work. And I've heard some disappointing outcomes with people who are trying to work with the deep brain structures, not really having outcomes that they were expecting from that. But, again, if it works, I'd be happy as a clam. If you could see everything deep in the brain from the surface with the software package and it would show you that accurately, I'd be happy as a clam.
Well, I guess one way EEG
haven't seen it.
show signs of the cerebellar activity is through artifacts, right? Through tremor and downbeat nystagmus.
And,
with
and
the
in fact, we do see the behavioral output of it, and
mhm,
it's usually it causes an artifactual source.
yeah,
But you're measuring the activity from the cerebellum by the behavior at its output, and that's as real as the day is long, and it's well known. It's classical medicine. So it isn't like it's an invisible structure that we can't get any access to. And when we're working with movement disorders and we're working frontally and with SMR, we're actually the frontal lobe doesn't just go straight to the motor strip; it goes down to the caudate, putamen, globus pallidus, thalamus, subthalamus. This whole subcortical circuitry has the cerebellum hooked into it. So we're getting a reflection of it in the work that we do on SMR and movement disorders, and so it may not be immediately visible, but its impact on areas that we do see are measurable, and obviously the behavior as well.
Doctor, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on adding neurofeedback to a chiropractic practice. How does that work? Like how does it complement one another? You got any thoughts?
I think it really depends on, the direction of your and focus of your practice, right? I'm a chiropractic neurologist, so I have a extensive training in many different.
Yeah, how did you put those two together? I'm curious.
Well, chiropractic neurology, also known as functional neurology, is a specific specialty. That's why it's board certified. Ted Carrick is the founder of functional neurology. He's a genius. He's a researcher, developer. He continues to teach to this day for the Carrick Institute. That's really the only place to train and learn functional neurology at the highest level. And it's open to more than just chiropractors. You see medical doctors, physical therapists, all sorts of specialists that are learning how to do it. Because it's not about chiropractic, it's just integrating the latest advances of neuroscience now from a diagnostic perspective and from a therapeutic perspective. And that's why you just integrate every tool that you can think of. If it's a valid tool, then we're probably going to use it unless it's like just cost prohibitive.
Can you speak to chronic pain?
Yeah, absolutely. Like that, Dirk de Ritter has wonderful papers on chronic pain and thalamocortical dysrhythmia and beta spindles at the somatosensory cortex. That's just one marker that you can identify, of course. But that's why you don't have to be a chiropractic neurologist to utilize neurofeedback. A lot of us are doing other, chiropractors are using it for like ADHD, or might be using it for chronic pain or helping with sleep. But the more the more depth and specific you can help somebody. So really just depends on what that range is.
What market are you going after? Because we got our 30,000 subscribers that are floating around out there, dropping in and dropping out, and they say, "Oh yeah, Dr. Chung, I got an issue with." Who are you going after so we can send people your way?
Yeah, I mean, my clinic, we see a lot of traumatic brain injuries, chronic dizziness, like vestibular migraine and others. We see a lot of movement disorders and balance disorders like dystonia and Parkinson's and stroke rehabilitation. And then a lot of just long COVID cases and really just complex neurological conditions that require a more comprehensive approach, because most of us, like I said, need a combination of neurotherapy and also rehabilitation. So that really kind of fits to almost most cases out there. But when it's more of a complex case, those are the things like, well, should I refer to a chiropractic neurologist? Absolutely, because we want to get a larger perspective. And so that's what I focus on in my practice in San Francisco is, a lot of traumatic brain injuries and chronic dizziness, dysautonomia, but it's just complex cases that people need help.
And I have to say that the EEGs that we've reviewed have not been the usual simple, ADD symptom presentation. He taxes the ability to actually fully understand the EEG by bringing difficult cases, and I appreciate that. It's still fun to try and solve the world's most difficult puzzle by looking at the EEG without getting the actual history necessarily up front. I prefer knowing the age of the client so I can get a kind of age norm setting for tunings and distributions of things. But if I go in with somebody's idea of what their problem is up front, I'll have an idea. And perceptual bias is a terrible thing when you're reading an EEG. It's best to go in clear-headed and open-focused without necessarily a theory as to what something might be wrong. It'll speak to you eventually when you look at it.
And reviewing EEGs with Jay in the first thing in the morning is a great way to start the day.
What do you see coming up that gets you kind of excited on how technology? I mean, we brought up AI, but we'll get past AI. Like Parkinson's, or is there a symptom or whatever the DSM-5 number is that hey, neurofeedback could help or complement chiropractic services? Is there anything that's getting you excited that like, oh wow, I see a future for this?
Well, I'm really excited because I just launched our new remote neurotherapy programs. And it's really driven by the passion and need for people to have more access to care. They can't, for a variety of reasons, for not being able to leave work or family obligations or just fatigue of going into the office. People need more frequent treatment to get the results they need. And so we also lowered the cost to do that. So I've always been changing the different equipment I use. So now I have better equipment that's for remote neurofeedback and then remote neuromodulation techniques. So we can do the afferent kind of stimulation aspects to drive and stimulate those systems. And then a lot of different aspects of personalized rehab. So sometimes starting in the office with that, but then telehealth and many ways to follow up and develop a comprehensive plan to do that stimulate, engage, and train component. That gets me really excited because there's so many people that I only get so far in the beginning. We're starting an exciting process in the office, and how do we continue that at home? And for people that don't have access at all, they can at least fly in and get a program set up, and we can track them with much more accuracy now. So I'm just really excited that can be better outcomes and more affordable for everybody.
Now you're in San Francisco, but if somebody like I'm in Chicago, are you working on the remote end of the business?
Well, currently I could only do in the state of California unless I set up a coaching practice, which I might do later on. But so people would still have to fly in to see me in California, or I collaborate with a local doctor in their state. So that's also possible by consulting other doctors to help with their patients. So I'd be advising the doctors, so we could still do remote therapy programs in that way.
Got it. And what's the best way? Okay, we got their attention. How do they get a hold of you, doctor?
Yeah, you can go to NeuroAxisHealth.com, and phone number is 415-776-7040. And feel free to reach out. We offer a free 15-minute phone consultations for anybody who's a prospective patient, want to discuss the details of the case. Same thing if it's peer-to-peer, if you're a colleague and you're thinking maybe this is something that can help my patient, give us a call and we'll set up a phone call. So.
And if you want a 15-minute consultation at the Solano Yacht Club in October, Jay.
October 8th through the 11th and departing on the 12th, but there's some people that are going to kind of stick around and chat on the morning of the 12th, Sunday departure day. But the meeting's going to end up covering a lot of the kinds of stuff we've been talking about. We do have a specific talk about movement disorders, AI and EEG lab interfaces, and lots of interesting clinical talks on epilepsy and clinical outcomes. And we do have Lee Steinberg stopping in, and you might think, well, what's a sports agent stopping in to do a talk for? But when you've represented enough people that have had head injuries that are severe, and you're not just a jerk ripping them off as an agent who's a jerk, you actually set up things like a annual meeting with doctors that come in and help with TBI with sports folks and so forth. So Lee has actually, he's done very well for himself, and he's plowed it back in to the tune of about $1 billion of philanthropy.
Jeez.
So, he's a serious person, and he's got things to say. And I'm always happy to have somebody who's got things to say, pop in. He'll be there for people to chat with. Isabella Harbison, the tennis player pro who was intractable epileptic and got a tennis scholarship and graduated with honors out of Baylor, and is playing tennis professionally in Europe right now. If her schedule allows, she'll be there in person. If it doesn't allow, she'll be there on Zoom. Her case is going to be presented by her and I together. And Nick and Tiff Thompson will be there, and Nick Douglas, Tiff Thompson, and their talk. I'm doing a talk on consciousness and cross-frequency coupling, which kind of leads into, I think, some of the work that they do with cross-frequency coupling and meditative trainings and things such as that. But it's good to put some kind of perspective on what the hell is consciousness anyway, when you're not just talking philosophically about it, but you're talking to a tech, so I've got to either be able to stick a needle electrode in it or measure it from outside somehow that we know, and putting that together as to how consciousness works as a measurable EEG ERP model, I think ends up being something that ends up helping people get a kind of a better feel for what we're really doing. Anyway, all that's going to go down over a few days. Lots of fun chats in between. Santiago Brand will be there. Lisa Bartoloro from Italy will be over talking about a family dynamics change when the intractable epileptic no longer was epileptic. She did a local case, but she has all sorts of measurements of family dynamic stuff, and that's always interesting. So anyway, we're going to have some fun, and sometimes this gets long enough to deserve to be auctioned off. And I think it's kind of reached that point. So I think I'll probably auction off the beard this year, see who wants to pay to shave it off. And
does that include the mustache? The whole thing?
Oh yeah. They can style it any way they want. I'll leave it on for 24 hours. I've had some pretty entertaining ones before. They braided and put beads on the long set. Anyway, that whatever they do is fine. As I say, I'll leave it for 24 hours. That'll be Saturday night, so I can hide all day Sunday if it's a bad one, So
I think you can make a hell of a lot of money if they turn that into a comb over.
What in Australia, I auctioned it off, and they pasted it onto a wig head, the kind they measure for electrode placements, and they auctioned that off the next year, $500 for my ratty beard pasted on a wig head. I thought the only thing that deserved as a match, so. But it's $24,625 raised across the years. It's a low overhead donation
for students.
Yeah, student funds.
Yeah.
So,
well, Dr. Rachman Chung, NeuroAxisHealth.com. Thank you for showing up for the show. Don't be a stranger. We got a Q&A every Wednesday, 6 p.m. Central Time. That you are welcome to join the panel, Doctor. And
I'm the undoctor.
So. You're not a Pepper, Dr. Pepper.
No. That's Eric. That's Eric.
Thanks for showing up for the NeuroNoodle Neurofeedback Podcast, guys. Have a great weekend, Dr. Chung. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
guys. See you in October, Doc.
All right.
The NeuroNoodle Podcast is supported by listeners and businesses just like you.